The shout that stopped. Time. The lobby of Langston Global Tower gleamed like a palace of steel and glass, sunlight bending into sharp reflections across the polished marble floor. Executives hurried past the revolving doors, their voices clipped, their strides swift as though the very air carried deadlines. At the center of it all moved Ava Langston, the CEO herself, a woman whose name alone could alter the course of entire industries. Her steps were measured, her posture perfect, her tailored suit like armor fitted for the battlefield of corporate wars. She was late, 12 minutes late to be exact. And for a woman whose reputation thrived on precision, lateness was an irritant like grit in an otherwise flawless diamond. Her driver had already pulled up the sleek black sedan to the curb, engine humming with quiet power, the chrome handle gleaming beneath the afternoon sun. As Ava descended the steps, the crowd of employees and visitors parted instinctively, their gazes following her as though she carried gravity itself. They saw the flawless image, the immaculate hair pinned neatly, the sharp eyes hidden behind designer glasses, the leather briefcase gripped like a weapon of authority. None saw the exhaustion buried beneath her composure. None heard the gnawing whisper of worry that lived in her chest, a secret wound she carried silently while steering a billion-dollar empire. She reached the final step, heels ticking against stone like a countdown, and extended her hand toward the car door. That was, when the shout cut the air, "Ma'am, don't get in the car." The voice came raw, desperate, sharp enough to slice through the hum of traffic and chatter. For a moment the world froze. Ava's hand lingered inches from the chrome handle, her mind jolted as if she had touched fire. The shout came again, louder this time, filled with urgency that carried no rehearsed politeness, no corporate rhythm, only fear. "Don't get in the car!" All eyes snapped toward the source. A man in gray janitor's clothes stood near the edge of the pavement, dark skin shining with sweat, his chest heaving as though he had sprinted from another world to deliver the words. A heavy keyring clattered at his hip, swinging wildly as though echoing the panic in his voice. His name, though most in the building never bothered to know it, was Liam Brooks. To them he was a night shift janitor, a man invisible in the hours when executives slept and the building's lights dimmed. But in this moment, he was impossible to ignore. Security moved instantly. Marcus Graves, the head of corporate security, stepped forward like a blade drawn from its sheath. Another guard closed in from the side, hands tense, ready to drag the man away. "Step back, sir," Graves barked, his voice heavy with command. His hand slid instinctively toward the holster, hidden beneath his jacket. "Step away from the CEO now." But Liam didn't move. His feet stayed rooted, his eyes fixed on Ava with a clarity that defied the panic around him. He raised his voice again, rough and cracking, as though every word tore from the depth of his lungs. "Please, don't get in the car. It isn't safe." The air shifted. Ava's instincts, sharpened by years of navigating deception and risk, prickled with unease. A shout from a janitor should have meant nothing, should have been swept away as madness, but there was something in his eyes, a fear too precise to be fabricated. She pulled her hand back from the door, her heartbeat drumming louder than the city traffic. "Graves," she said, her tone sharp but calm. "What is this?" "Night shift staff," Graves answered quickly, eyes flicking between the sedan and Liam. "Name's Brooks, likely delusional. We'll handle it." But Ava didn't step forward. Her gaze lingered on Liam, reading the desperation carved into every line of his face. This wasn't a man craving attention. This wasn't the incoherent rambling of a madman. This was something else. Within seconds, the scene spiraled. Orders flew into radios. Barricades formed. A bomb squad robot rolled across the pavement, its mechanical arms scanning the sleek black vehicle. Yellow tape cut the street in half, forcing pedestrians back. Phones lifted, cameras recorded. The sedan's driver, pale and trembling, was pulled away and placed behind the barrier. Through it all, Liam stood cuffed and cornered, his wrists bound by steel that bit into his skin. He didn't resist. He didn't fight. His gaze remained, fixed on the sedan, unblinking as though staring at a predator waiting in the shadows. Minutes stretched into half an hour. The bomb squad scoured the car, underbody, dashboard, trunk, every compartment. Nothing. No wires, no explosives, no threat. Slowly, the barricades came down, the sirens quieted, and the crowd began to disperse. To the public, it looked like nothing more than a false alarm. But to Ava Langston, it was something far more dangerous. She walked forward, heels clicking against pavement, her expression carved from ice. The officers prepared to haul Liam away, their voices muttering about false reports and wasted time. "Jail's where you're headed," one sneered, yanking him to his feet. But Ava lifted a hand, halting them with a single gesture. "Wait." Her voice was low, firm, the kind that made even law enforcement pause. She stepped closer, meeting Liam's eyes. "You just destroyed my schedule, my meeting, and potentially my reputation. Give me one reason why I shouldn't let them drag you out of here." Liam's chest heaved, his heart slamming like a drum. He thought of the shredded papers he had pieced together in secrecy, the sleepless nights spent staring at fragments of numbers, the terrifying conclusion he had reached. If he spoke at all, he would sound insane. He had only one card left to play. "Neurosynaptic decay syndrome," he whispered. "Dot." The words slipped into the air like a secret not meant to be spoken, and in that instant, something in Ava's face changed. Her breath caught. Her jaw tightened. It was only a flicker, but it was enough. He had touched a nerve she kept buried beneath layers of walls, contracts, and silence. Ava turned sharply to the officers. "Release him," she ordered. The officers hesitated, surprised, but one look at her eyes silenced any protest. The cuffs clicked open, metal falling away from Liam's wrists. "Take him to the 50th floor, Ava commanded. "No calls. No contacts. He stays in my custody." As the crowd melted away and the sirens faded, a strange silence settled over the scene. For most, the story would end there. A false alarm, a foolish janitor, an overreaction. But Ava Langston knew better. Something deeper had been unearthed, and in the reflection of the glass tower behind her, she didn't see a janitor anymore. She saw the crack of a storm splitting her empire wide open. The weight of two lives. The steel doors of the 50th floor boardroom closed with a resonant thud, sealing Liam Brooks inside. He stood in the vast glass chamber, surrounded by walls that stretched high above the city, reflecting the glittering skyline like an aquarium of power. A polished obsidian table ran across the center of the room, so perfectly gleaming it looked like it had been carved from the night sky itself. The lights overhead were cool and white, washing everything in a sterile glow that made Liam's janitor uniform appear even grayer, more out of place than ever. He gripped the edge of the table for balance, his knuckles white, his chest still, heaving from the adrenaline of shouting down a CEO in front of her entire company. For years he had been invisible in these halls, moving silently at night with a mop, a bucket, and his keys jingling like muted bells of servitude. Executives never looked him in the eye. Some didn't even know his name. He was a fixture of the background, part of the machine that kept Langston Tower spotless while those above made decisions that swayed economies. Yet today, with one desperate cry, he had dragged himself into the center of the machine's gaze. Now he stood where men in tailored suits had pitched billion-dollar deals, where Ava Langston herself had signed contracts that determined the fate of thousands. And instead of discussing profit margins or growth curves, they were deciding what to do with him. A janitor who had screamed about danger in front of cameras. The door opened and Marcus Graves entered first, his posture like a wall of iron. He didn't trust Liam. Every flicker of his eyes, every shift of his shoulders betrayed that suspicion. He took his post by the door, arms folded across his chest, eyes never leaving Liam. Moments later, Ava walked in. Her assistant trailed behind with a tablet tucked against his arm, but she dismissed him with a gesture. The room belonged only to her now. She circled the table with the quiet precision of a predator, her heels clicking faintly against the marble, her gaze locked on Liam as though peeling away the layers of his soul. "Neurosynaptic decay syndrome," she said at last, her voice measured but heavy. "That is not a phrase a janitor should know. It is not a condition one stumbles upon. Explain yourself. The words weighed on Liam like a judge's gavel. He swallowed, throat dry, eyes burning from lack of sleep. He thought of his daughter Maya, sitting by her bedroom window with a sketchbook in her lap, drawing castles with high walls to keep monsters away. He thought of her small hand trembling as she tried to color inside the lines, the cruel evidence of her illness tightening around her childhood like a noose. His voice cracked when he spoke, but he forced the words out. My daughter, Maya, 7 years old. 6 months ago she was diagnosed with it. Her hands, they started to shake. Doctors said it was early but fast. They said there's no cure, nothing to stop it. They said, his voice faltered, his chest tight with the memory of those sterile hospital rooms. They said it would take her. Ava's eyes narrowed, though her face betrayed almost nothing. Only the slightest tightening of her jaw suggested that his words struck deeper than she wanted anyone to see. Liam continued, his voice gaining strength from desperation. I clean the floors. I empty shred bins. I see things people don't think I notice. A few weeks ago I found documents, shredded, torn apart. I pieced them back together at night in the closet where no one could see me. Numbers, names, medical terms, Langston Initiative, funding reports, and that word, neurosynaptic decay syndrome, over and over again, my daughter's disease right there in this building's trash. He lifted his eyes to hers, desperate, pleading. What was it doing there? Why would executives at Langston Global be working on something connected to that illness unless they knew something? Unless they were hiding something? The room grew cold with silence. Outside, the city lights twinkled, oblivious to the storm brewing in the boardroom. Graves shifted slightly at the door, but Ava raised a hand, stopping him from interrupting. She paced slowly around Liam, her mind racing with possibilities. His story sounded insane, yet it was tethered by a detail too precise to dismiss. The illness she herself knew too intimately. She had buried that knowledge deep beneath NDAs, contracts and secrecy. And now here stood a janitor who had dragged it into the open dot. Finally, she stopped across the table from him. Her voice softened, though it carried an edge like sharpened glass. You risked everything, shouting like that in front of my entire company. If you're wrong, your life is ruined. If you're right, then you've just stepped into a world you cannot walk back from. So tell me, Mr. Brooks, why should I believe you? Liam's chest heaved, his voice breaking under the weight of truth. Because I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for my daughter. And if I'm wrong, then I'll pay the price. But if I'm right, then someone in this company is lying and people are going to get hurt. Maybe worse. He leaned forward, the words trembling but steady. And if you care about your name, your company, or the truth, you can't afford to ignore me. Ava studied him in silence. The seconds stretched like an eternity. Then she turned sharply toward Graves. He stays here. No contact with anyone. Lock down all access until I say otherwise. Her voice carried no doubt, no hesitation. Graves hesitated, his distrust still burning, but one look at her eyes silenced him. He gave a curt nod and stepped back. As the door shut again, Ava pulled the tablet closer, her fingers gliding across the glass screen. Everything on Liam Brooks, she ordered quietly into the comms. Employment history, financial records, medical files, and full details on Maya Brooks at St. Jude's Hospital. Use my name to request access. I want it within the hour. When the line went dead, she looked back at Liam. For the first time, her gaze softened, not in kindness but in recognition. He was not an intruder. He was a father carrying the same unbearable weight she had once carried. And though she didn't say it aloud, she knew. The story had only just begun. The alliance in shadows. The 50th floor boardroom felt less like a corporate chamber now, and more like a cage suspended in the sky. Hours had passed since Liam Brooks had been escorted into the room, and the glow of the city below had shifted from daylight's silver shimmer to the burnished gold of evening. Through the glass walls, skyscrapers lit up one by one like titans of steel waking under a new sky. Yet inside the room, the silence had grown heavy, suffocating. broken only by the occasional click of Marcus Graves's pen as he stood guard. By the door, his sharp eyes never leaving the man in janitor's clothes who now occupied a seat at the table meant for billion-dollar negotiations. Liam sat hunched, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his body still tense from the cuffs that had bruised his wrists earlier. He was no executive, no politician, no man trained to sit in the crosshairs of suspicion. He was a father who had been swept into waters far deeper than he had ever waded, and every beat of his heart screamed the same name, Maya. His daughter's face hovered in his mind like a lighthouse in a storm, her eyes wide, her small voice echoing, "Daddy, tell me a story tonight." The ache of knowing he might not keep that promise clawed at him until his chest felt hollow. The door opened with a quiet hiss, and Ava Langston entered again. This time she was alone, no assistant trailing behind, no tablet glowing in someone else's hands. She carried the device herself, tucked under her arm, her expression composed but her eyes sharper than before. She had spent the last hour combing through reports, medical files, and encrypted records that only a CEO of her standing could unlock. What she had seen left her shaken, though she masked it with the kind of control that came from years of commanding boardrooms. She set the tablet on the table and took the seat across from Liam, her posture rigid, her gaze unflinching. "I've reviewed the files," she began, her voice steady but lower than before, almost private. "Maya Brooks, 7 years old. Diagnosed with neurosynaptic decay syndrome. Stage 2. Clinical notes confirm tremors, motor loss, degenerative progression. The prognosis is grim." She paused, her eyes flickering briefly as though she were forcing herself to read words carved into her own memory. "You weren't lying." Liam let out a shaky breath, relief and sorrow colliding in his chest. He had hoped she would believe him. But hearing his daughter's illness laid bare in the sterile language of medical files still tore through him like glass. "She's my whole world," he whispered. "Every night I sit by her bed and promise her the monsters won't get through the castle gate she draws. I promise her I'll protect her. And then I come here and find shredded pieces of paper that tell me this company, the one I scrub floors for, is hiding something connected to her disease. You tell me, Miss Langston, what am I supposed to do? Stay silent? Pretend I didn't see it? Watch my daughter's life slip away while I mop the hallways of the people keeping answers locked behind steel doors?" Ava's lips pressed into a thin line. For a fleeting moment, the corporate armor cracked. She knew what it was to live with that same suffocating helplessness, to sit in hospital rooms where doctors avoided eye contact because the truth was too heavy to soften. She had lived it in her own way, though the details remained buried deep, sealed from the world. That was why Liam's words cut through her walls. They were not the pleas of a desperate employee. They were the cries of a parent who had nothing left but fight. "You don't understand what you've stepped into," Ava said finally, her tone colder, though her eyes betrayed something warmer beneath. "The Langston Initiative is complicated. Layers of research, partnerships, contracts, billions of dollars tied to it. Do you realize what happens if you accuse this company of hiding something? The board will crush you. The government will bury you in litigation, and She stopped herself, catching the dangerous thread of her own confession before it slipped further. Liam leaned forward, his voice rough but determined. "Then why haven't you handed me over to the police? Why am I still sitting here instead of rotting in a cell for causing a false alarm? You could have destroyed me with one order, but you didn't. You know there's truth in what I'm saying." Ava's silence was answer enough. She looked down at the tablet again, scrolling through expenditure reports tied to the Langston Initiative. Most of the entries were pristine, polished, designed for investors' eyes. But buried in the appendices, she had found names she didn't recognize, invoices that led to shell companies, and one name that sent a chill through her veins. Dr. Corbin Vance, a man once celebrated in the medical field, later stripped of his license for falsifying research data, manipulating trials, and endangering patients. Yet here his name appeared again, tucked discreetly within contracts tied to her company's most ambitious medical project. She set the tablet down and fixed Liam with a stare. "You were right about one thing. Something is wrong here." Very wrong. But if you think shouting in front of cameras is dangerous, you have no idea what kind of fire you've just walked into. Whoever is moving behind these documents is powerful, and if they discover that you know, they won't just come for you, they'll come for your daughter too. The words landed like a blow and Liam's blood ran cold. The thought of Maya being dragged into the shadows of this corporate war ignited a terror he could barely contain. He clenched his fists, voice trembling but steady. Then you'd better make sure that doesn't happen, because I will not stop. I will not let my daughter's life become collateral damage in some scheme to pad profits. If you're the woman people say you are, the one who built an empire from nothing, then you know what it means to fight for something that matters. Ava's gaze lingered on him, measuring, weighing. For years she had fought battles in boardrooms, across oceans against competitors who wielded billions like weapons. But this was different. She was staring at a man with no wealth, no title, no armor except the love for his child. And in that raw determination, she saw something more, dangerous than money or power. She saw conviction. Finally, she stood, her decision crystallizing in silence. From this moment forward, Mr. Brooks, she said, her voice quiet but commanding, you do not move without my knowledge. You do not speak to anyone outside this room. And in return, I will find out the truth. But if you lie to me again, if you hold anything back, you won't be protected by your desperation. Do you understand? Liam nodded, his eyes burning but resolute. All I want is the truth, and my daughter safe. Ava extended her hand, a gesture both of authority and of reluctant alliance. Liam hesitated, then reached out, his calloused hand clasping hers. In that moment, the janitor and the CEO formed an alliance no one in the building could have predicted. It was fragile, dangerous, and built on desperation. But it was real. Outside the glass walls, the city pulsed with life, unaware that within the tower, a single handshake had just shifted the course of everything. Cracks in the empire. The night spread across the city like ink spilled over glass. From the 50th floor, the streets below seemed like threads of light weaving an endless pattern, the horns of traffic drifting upward in faint echoes. Yet within Langston Tower, the glow of the boardroom remained harsh and unyielding, the kind of sterile light that erased shadows but never warmth. Ava Langston sat at the head of the obsidian table, her eyes fixed on the tablet that displayed reports, contracts, and encrypted communications. Her mind was sharp, but beneath the sharpness lived an exhaustion that clawed at her bones. Across the table, Liam Brooks sat with his elbows pressed to the edge, his hands clasped tightly, his shoulders hunched from the weight of hours that felt like years. For most of his life, Liam had been invisible. He had learned how to move quietly, how to keep his head low, how to let people pass without noticing him. A janitor's badge meant access without recognition, presence without importance. Yet tonight, his voice, his knowledge, his desperation had forced the attention of one of the most powerful women in the city. And though he sat there in stained gray clothes, though he was out of place in the gleaming chamber, there was something undeniable about the fire in his eyes. Ava scrolled through another series of documents. The Langston Initiative, on the surface, was a bold research program designed to tackle neurological diseases. Publicly, it was framed as a venture of hope, a project meant to pioneer treatments and push the boundaries of science. But hidden, beneath the polished reports, she saw something darker. The numbers didn't align. Millions were funneled into side contracts with shell companies that dissolved after a few months. Invoices appeared under vague categories like data management or trial logistics, only to vanish without explanation. And always, there were faint trails leading back to Dr. Corbin Vance, the discredited scientist whose name should have been erased from serious medicine. Her jaw tightened. The more she uncovered, the more it felt like staring into a pit that had no bottom. And worst of all, the pit lay within her own empire. She had spent her life building Langston Global into a fortress of innovation and respect. Yet here, within the walls she trusted most, rot had begun to spread. Liam's voice broke the silence, low but steady. You see it, don't you? This isn't just about my daughter. They're hiding something bigger. Ava lifted her eyes from the screen to meet his. She studied him carefully, still wary of how much to trust, yet unable to ignore the clarity of his words. "Tell me exactly how you found the documents," she said. Liam leaned back, exhaling slowly. "It was late. I was cleaning the research wing on the 22nd floor. Most nights I move quickly. Trash, recycling, mopping, done. But that night I noticed something strange. The shred bins were fuller than usual, almost overflowing. I pulled a bag out and some of the strips fell onto the floor. Medical terms caught my eye. I couldn't walk away. So I took a bag. Just one. I hid it under the supplies cart, and when my shift ended, I carried it home." His throat tightened. As he spoke, his shame and defiance colliding. "For weeks I pieced it together in secret. Tape, glue, sleepless nights. I knew if anyone caught me I'd lose my job. Maybe worse. But when I saw that word, neurosynaptic decay syndrome, it felt like the universe put those papers in my hands. My little girl's life spelled out in strips of garbage. How could I ignore that?" Ava didn't answer immediately. She sat back in her chair, fingers steepled, her gaze shifting between him and the tablet. Something about his story, the way he described piecing together strips of paper late at night, the way he linked every fragment to his daughter, made it impossible to dismiss him. He wasn't driven by curiosity or ambition. He was driven by love. And love, Ava knew, was the most dangerous motivator of all. "You risked your job, your freedom, maybe even your life," she said finally, all for a bag of shredded paper. Liam's eyes burned as he looked at her. "For Maya, I'd risk everything. You don't know what it's like to watch your child's hands shake, to hear doctors tell you there's no hope. When the world tells you there's nothing you can do, you find something. Anything. Even if it's madness." For the first time, Ava's composure cracked. Just slightly, but enough. She knew exactly what it was like. Years ago, she had sat in hospital corridors listening to words from physicians that sounded more like verdicts than guidance. She had buried that part of her life under work, under steel and glass, under the empire she built. But Liam's words dug it back up. Raw and unhealed. Graves, who had stood silent at the door for hours, finally spoke. His voice was stern, distrustful, yet laced with the practicality of a man who had seen too many lies. "Ma'am, this man is dangerous. Maybe not with weapons, but with desperation. You can't let emotion cloud judgment. He could be playing you." Ava's eyes snapped to him, sharp as a blade. "And if he isn't, if what he found is real, then this company is compromised at its core. And if that's true, Marcus, then the only dangerous man in this room is the one who uncovered it." Graves's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. Turning back to Liam, Ava placed the tablet flat on the table and slid it toward him. On the screen glowed the profile of Dr. Corbin Vance, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow, his history littered with scandal. "This is the man linked to those documents. Do you recognize the name?" Liam studied the screen, shaking his head. "No, but if he's behind this, then he's the reason the papers were shredded." "Vance should never be near medical research again," Ava said, her voice heavy with disgust. "If Finch, my chief of research, has been working with him, then he's betrayed this company and every promise we've made." Her words hung in the air like thunder. The idea that one of her most trusted executives was secretly funneling money to a disgraced scientist was more than betrayal. It was a knife in the foundation of everything she had built. Liam leaned closer, his voice low but urgent. "If Finch is hiding this, then he knows someone is asking questions. You called him earlier, didn't you? If he panicked, he won't sit still, he'll move. And if he's moving, then something worse is about to happen." Ava stared at him, realization dawning. He was right. Finch wouldn't wait to be exposed. He would accelerate whatever plan he had in motion. The time they had left to uncover the truth was slipping through their fingers. At that moment, the boardroom doors opened without warning. One of Ava's senior vice presidents stepped in, her expression tight, her voice clipped. "Ava, the board is demanding answers. They heard about the incident this afternoon. A janitor stopping the CEO from entering her own car. The rumors are spreading, investors are calling. They want to know why you protected him. Her gaze flicked toward Liam with disdain. Why you're wasting time on a man who should be in jail. Ava straightened in her chair, her expression hardening into the armor she wore so well. Tell the board, she said coldly, that I am investigating an internal matter, and remind them that I don't answer to gossip. I answer to results. The executive hesitated, clearly unsettled by her tone, but nodded and retreated. As the door closed again, Liam exhaled sharply. They're turning on you. They've always been waiting to, Ava replied, her voice flat. Power doesn't make you untouchable, Mr. Brooks. It only paints a target on your back. The words sank deep into Liam's chest. For the first time he realized the cost Ava was paying for protecting him. She wasn't just risking her reputation, she was risking the empire she had spent a lifetime building. He leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with gratitude. Then why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. You could have left me in cuffs. Ava's eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. Because I've seen too many people suffer in silence, and because... She paused, her voice lowering into something almost fragile. Your daughter's fight isn't just yours. The room fell into silence again, but it was no longer the silence of suspicion. It was the silence of two people realizing they were bound by something greater than circumstance. And outside the glass walls, the empire of Langston Global stood tall and gleaming, unaware that inside its heart, cracks were beginning to spread. Cracks that would soon shake the company to its core. The reckoning. The first light of dawn crept over the city, brushing the towering glass structures in hues of gold and pale violet. But inside Langston Tower, shadows still ruled. Ava Langston moved through the hallways with a quiet urgency, the heels of her shoes barely making a sound on the polished floor. Her mind was racing faster than her feet, and for the first time in years, she felt a gnawing fear that wasn't professional. It was personal, deep, and raw. The documents Liam had uncovered, the connections to Vance, Finch, and the shadowy contracts hidden under Langston Global's name, all pointed to something catastrophic. This wasn't merely corporate sabotage. It was a carefully orchestrated scheme that could end lives, ruin careers, and destroy everything she had built. Liam followed closely behind, his own nerves taut like piano wires, carrying the evidence securely in a backpack he never let out of his sight. They reached Ava's private research lab, a sprawling space that once symbolized hope, innovation, and advancement. Now the gleaming instruments, glass chambers, and organized chaos of experiments were tainted by the knowledge that betrayal had nested within these walls. Ava set the backpack down and spread the contents across a wide counter. Shredded papers carefully pieced together with Scotch tape, photographs, encrypted USB drives, and handwritten notes that trembled with the weight of revelation. Liam knelt beside the pile, running his fingers over the papers like he could will them into coherence. If this is what I think it is, he murmured, then Finch has been experimenting on children. Ava's breath caught. She had suspected greed and corruption, but the thought that Finch had crossed every imaginable ethical line, that he could harm innocence for profit or recognition, tightened her chest like iron. She touched a photograph, a blurry image of a child connected to medical machinery, numbers scribbled beside their name, and her stomach churned. This was no longer about Liam's daughter alone. This was about every life Finch had quietly manipulated, measured, and used as a stepping stone for his ambitions. We can't wait for the board, Ava said, voice low but fierce, cutting through the panic. If we go through official channels, Finch will have time to erase everything, to destroy evidence, maybe even flee the country. We need to act now. Liam nodded, the first spark of relief flickering across his weary features. He had been invisible for so long, powerless in the face of authority. But now he was a part of something bigger, something decisive. Then we go in together, he said, full force. No holding back. Hours passed as they worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence, cross-referencing the shredded files with digital data they extracted from Langston's internal servers, and documenting every transaction. Each revelation was a blow, exposing a web of corruption so deep it was almost surreal. Vance had been receiving private funding through shell companies. Finch had manipulated trial data to hide failures. And in one chilling notation, a plan to fast-track human trials with minimal oversight had been proposed. The weight of the truth pressed down on them, and yet in the midst of despair, there was clarity. They now held the key to stopping it. By late afternoon, they had compiled a dossier thick with proof, the kind that could not be denied or swept under the rug. Ava stared at it, her reflection mirrored in the darkened glass of the lab windows. The city below hummed with oblivious life, unaware that inside its tallest tower a reckoning was being prepared. Liam, exhausted but determined, leaned against the counter, his eyes shadowed with worry. We need witnesses. Evidence alone won't stop them. If Finch has influence in the board, he'll fight back. He always does. Ava nodded, a plan forming in her mind as she drew a steadying breath. We'll go public. Press, regulators, social media, every outlet we can control. The moment Finch realizes we're exposing him, he'll try to manipulate the narrative. But if we hit fast and hard, there's no escape. Her voice carried a weight that demanded belief, and Liam, for the first time since their partnership began, allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Night fell again. But they didn't leave the lab. Instead, they moved through the building like shadows, documenting every corner, every record, every piece of evidence that could be leveraged. The clock ticked mercilessly, each second carrying the potential for Finch's retaliation. Suddenly, a soft alarm broke the tense rhythm, a security alert indicating movement on the floor above. Ava froze, and Liam instinctively pressed against the wall. They're here, he whispered. Finch knows. Before Ava could respond, the lab doors burst open. Finch himself strode in, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. But his eyes betrayed fury, and there was a cold, calculated precision in the way he moved. Behind him were two security officers, men whose loyalty was bought with promises, money, and fear. Ava, Finch's voice cut through the air like a blade. I never imagined you'd stoop so low, protecting a janitor, harboring a thief, in your own building. Pathetic. Ava stood her ground, placing a hand on the dossier. I'm not stooping, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. I'm standing, for every life you've endangered, every violation you've hidden, and for the people you've betrayed. Your time is over, Finch. For a moment, Finch seemed amused, as though her defiance were a trivial curiosity. But then he lunged forward, grabbing one of the papers from the counter. Liam reacted instantly, stepping in front of him, and a scuffle erupted. Finch shoved, Liam resisted, and in the chaos, Ava grabbed a camera, transmitting live feeds to regulators and media contacts she had trusted for emergencies. The numbers, the photographs, the files, they were all going public, streamed to every device that could receive them. Panic flashed in Finch's eyes as he realized that the game he had thought controlled was slipping from his hands. The confrontation escalated, bodies clashing, shouts echoing off the high ceilings. But Ava and Liam were precise, coordinated. Every move was deliberate, born from weeks of preparation and sleepless nights. Finally, with one decisive maneuver, Finch was pinned against a counter, the evidence secure in Ava's hands, the live transmission running uninterrupted. The security officers hesitated, caught between loyalty and legality, and in that hesitation, Finch's empire of control shattered. Silence followed. The lights flickered, the air thick with tension and relief. Ava lowered her hands, breathing heavily, her gaze meeting Liam's. It's done, she said softly, though the adrenaline still coursed through her veins. For now. Liam shook his head, still stunned. For now, he echoed. He thought of Maya, of the children unknowingly endangered, and he realized that victory was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over, but at least they had turned the tide. Ava allowed herself a moment, a small, fleeting one, to acknowledge the weight of what had just happened. She had risked everything, her company, her reputation, her life, to expose the truth. And in doing so, she had discovered something unexpected: the power of courage and conviction, not just in herself, but in someone who had once been invisible, a man whose desperation had become the spark that ignited justice. As the city slept beneath the shadows of Langston Tower, a quiet victory echoed through the building. Yet the night was far from over. Finch's defeat would awaken others, rivals, opportunists, and those who would challenge the order. But Ava and Liam knew one truth above all else: when love, determination, and justice collided, even the strongest empires could fall.